All right, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you guys are having a good time. And I want to introduce Danny Akacki. He's got an interesting talk on improv and social engineering. Without further ado, please give a warm round of applause for Danny Akacki.
Oh, don't clap yet. You haven't actually heard the talk. You can save the booze for later. So, yeah, welcome. First of all, who's having an amazing time at the second BSidesPhilly? Like, this is pretty fucking great, right? I was so happy. This is my second time presenting. I got to present last year, too, and just so happy that Philly finally has this conference for themselves. So, happy to see all you guys out here. So, yeah, my name's Danny Akacki, and I wrote a talk about how you can use improv comedy to be a better social engineer, whether you're new to social engineering or a seasoned vet. By a show of hands, how many people have some aspect of SE in their jobs? Cool. And for those of you who haven't raised their hands, you guys are all social engineers because you do this stuff every day, right? When we wake up in the morning, nobody gives us a script, right? Nobody tells us how to interact with people or how to figure stuff out. And this is kind of the thought process I went through when somebody else, wasn't my original idea, somebody else gave me the idea to try improv comedy, just to be better at SE. So that's me. That's all my multiple Twitters that I barely ever visit except for my own. I actually run a Twitter and a contest happened this past year at DEF CON. What we did is we made about 50 different slide decks, all random, and had people come up and present, having never seen them before. Whose slide is it anyway? It was amazing. Actually, our winner of the DEF CON Whose Slide Is It Anyway contest is sitting right in the front row. Bia, stand up, please. She owned everybody. She was so good, man. And thank you to her father, Heave Hacker, for letting us curse like drunken sailors for 2 hours in front of her. I assume we didn't damage her any more than he already has. So, I also, actually, this slide's a little bit out of date. I run a local security meetup up in the Lehigh Valley in Easton. Anybody in the Lehigh Valley? Yes, one dude. Come up and hang out with us some night. Yeah, but we are actually now an official DEF CON group, DEF CON 610. So, we've been there for about a year, and we've got some really cool stuff coming up. Really proud of that. Also run a Twitter, infosanity.org, right? This one is pretty important to me. I started this website called infosanity.org, and it deals with, those of us in the hacker community that may have been having a bit of a difficult time, mental health issues, stress, anxiety, depression. So we have a Slack channel, and we have a Twitter, and we have a website. So look that up if you need it. If you know somebody else that needs it, it's very important to us. My buddy Heave up here also helps me admin that. So, yeah, that's enough about what I do on the side. Let's get down to business. Why? Right? Why this talk? I'm sure you are all sitting here because it looked fascinating to you. Basically it's because Deviant Olem told me to. I was at DerbyCon 2 years ago, not this past one, the one before, and in the SE Village, they were having this panel every night, and it had guys like Deviant and Grifter, and obviously like Chris, and I don't think Michelle was there, but they had these really great panels talking about, if you're a social engineer, can you turn it on or turn it off? And then naturally one of the questions from the back of the room was, well, how do we get better at this, right? Because we can't like SE people in real life, like that's kind of illegal. Like you can't go around asking, getting people's social security numbers. That's bad. Don't do that. So, but how do you practice, right? Like how do you get better at this? And it turns out, like I said in the very beginning, we're all improvisers. We do this every day, right? So, this goes, like, improv goes back a really, really long way, like, back to, like, the 1500s of troops of comedians would just travel around and just give these improvised shows. No scripts, no nothing. So this is a very old art form, as old as social engineering. From the dawn of time, like, one caveman was trying to trick another one into getting his fish, right? Like, that's just how we evolved. Like, we're all social engineers. And during this panel at DEF CON, or at DerbyCon, I'm sorry, Deviant said, well, I've heard some of the better social engineers study improv comedy. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because you have to really think on your feet, right? And it's nothing scripted. Like that's like the antithesis of what improv is about. So when you're on an SE engagement, you don't ever know how your target's going to respond to you. Whether you're doing, a physical penetration test, whether you're vishing, right? Whether you're fishing, you have to know what triggers people. You have to figure out like what these people care about, right? And it's tricky, and those are the unknown variables. I mean, you can know all the principles of influence. You could read, Robert Cialdini and study microexpressions all day long, but there's still that human element that's always going to be improvised on the spot. So I figured, hey, why the hell not? So up in Lehigh Valley, so I'm in Easton, there's like Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, right up the extension. In Bethlehem, at the Steel Stacks, they have Arts Quest, is this big building that they build around like the whole arts and community. They have concerts and all kinds of things. Well, it turns out, right in my backyard in Bethlehem, they have a big improv scene. They have one main troupe who does shows every Friday night, Man Dude Bro. Then they're amazing. Like, they'd be worth the 2-hour traffic jam on the Schuylkill just to get there to go see them. So I figured, okay, I went to go see a show, participated even a little bit. When you first come up, they ask for somebody to come up on stage, right? Because they need fodder for their improv show. How many people have ever been to an improv show? Cool. So a lot of this is new to you. That's awesome. So there's a lot of different ways to approach opening that improv show. They'll have somebody come up and like just talk, right? And this was my first kind of lesson in how improv parallels SE. Because you're basically, you are active listening, and you are getting information from these people to form the basis for your next hour or 2-hour show. It was awesome. And my first improv show, I was that guy. Nobody wanted to go up, so I was like, yeah, I'll be the dummy that raises my hand. I'll go up. And then I'm talking to them for a good 45 minutes. And what I was amazed by was how their initial question was, so who had a good day today? Who had a good day today, by the way? Anybody raise your hand? Awesome. I was hoping everybody would say it, but that's fine. And the guy who didn't, I'm going to come find you. We'll have beers later. Have a good day. So, but they immediately pivoted from that and got me talking about my relationships, my financials, nothing, I mean, obviously keeping some kind of OPSEC. But I was shocked that, like, by the end of the conversation, they knew, like, all this stuff about me, like, what the worst fight I ever had with my significant other was, where I shopped. And the whole time, my inner SC is going, oh shit, I hope nobody is writing this shit down, or I'm in big trouble. So that was a lot of fun. And then they did a whole, like, improv show based on that. And the information they were able to get and the attention to detail that they had listening to me just resounded with me. I'm like, I want to be that good. Even if I never did SE again ever in my life, or if I never was like a professional improviser, whatever, I want those skills. That was impressive. And it all spawned from just that panel talk at Derby. And so I started taking improv classes. They have, improv 101, 201, 301. I mean, we all take classes. We all learn. It's the same with them. And you build on these skills. And I did it specifically. I actually started, it was like a year ago, it'll be a year ago in January. And, just wanting to be better at SE, because I eventually want to get into, full-time SE and that kind of thing. And it also helps just your interactions with people, right? There's so many parallels between what we do in our industry and improv. So, and I was just shocked, like, right away from the first class in 101, it's all these parallels up here. Building rapport, active listening, empathy, right? Nonverbal communication in improv is just huge. When you're up on a stage and you have no script and you're just you're adults playing make-believe, which is amazing. How to frame yourself on stage, how to be present in that scene, and playing to the top of your intelligence, right? These are word for word what you can get out of improv that's going to help you along in your SE endeavors. So, just like SE, improv does have rules. It's not completely like willy-nilly. I'm just going to go on stage and act like a dick. There are rules of Two of the biggest ones that kind of overlap between, there's those 6 principles of influence and improv is commitment and reciprocity, right? And what I talk about with reciprocity is in improv, the core value is yes and, right? You're on stage with your scene partner, whatever they say, agree, and then add something to it. That's what helps the scene move along, right? That's how you get anywhere with anybody. How many of you have ever tried to argue with somebody who was on the opposite side of your argument and you were just saying why they were wrong and why they're stupid? That doesn't get you anywhere, right? What's better is when you talk to them and saying, yes, I understand you, and here is how I think we can make this better, right? And then understanding what they're valuing. If you can get, and empathy is just the hugest thing. What do people value? What can you take from what they want to get what you want? And it's insane the amount of overlap that's here. So building rapport, right? Just as in social engineering, building rapport with your scene partner is clutch. Nobody wants to be up on stage with somebody who's just not giving them anything, and they're not playing, and they're not yes-anding. One of the first exercises that we do in improv is, yes and is a staple for us. Try to do it with no but, or no and, or yes but. It doesn't go anywhere. You could try this with your friends at home. I promise it won't feel that silly. It's going to feel a lot silly. But if you just say no but and all these kinds of things, it doesn't go anywhere. So to build that rapport, you have to play with each other, right? And some of the principles of this in improv is those nonverbals. From the second you go out on stage, not only are you playing to your audience, but you're playing to what's called your back line, right? If you have, an improv troupe full of 8 people, 9 people, they're listening to you and they're following your scenes, and then you're doing the same with them. So that's a rapport building right there. Giving those nonverbal clues to them that they can follow later on. Ego suspension. We have a big problem with this. I don't know. I don't like making grand statements like that. Maybe I'll retract that. But some of us have been known to have problems with suspending our own egos. Because we're proud of what we do, right? We're I've been doing this for years, and this guy sucks, or this is why you're wrong. But in ego suspension, you both have to be equal. There is no such thing as a shitty scene. It's just a scene that's establishing the world, right? You can't go into an improv thing thinking you're better than somebody or this person sucks, because that's going to manifest itself later on, and you'll never be a cohesive unit when you're doing a scene. Validating others, again, that's the whole, your idea was awesome, or maybe it didn't work that well, but I'm still going to build on this because let's ride this freight train until it goes off the rails, right? It's either going to be magnificent or the greatest shit show you've ever seen. Either way, that's a good improv show. Asking how, when, and why. Building that world around you, right? Because literally, there's more stuff up here than would be on any improv stage I've ever been on. It would be nothing. And a lot of the building of the improv scenes come from, the back line comes out and they say, there's a desk right here, and there's a picture right here, and there's a fireplace, and there's a 3-legged dog over here. They're building that world, and they live in that for an hour. Right? So, how, when, why, gift giving. If I come out to establish a scene, you automatically want to know, who are these people to each other? What do they want from each other? And how is this going to move the scene forward? All of these things are part of building rapport, and it's the same with social engineering. Gift giving, all of these are word for word some of the principles of social engineering, right? Suspending your ego. One of my stories for this is I recently competed at DEF CON in the SE Village SE CTF, right? How many people have been to DEF CON? Cool. How many people have been to the SE Village in DEF CON? Awesome. So, for the SE CTF, about 2 weeks before, they give you your company. Mine was Nintendo. So I actually had my Nintendo set up as fucking motivation. I ended up just playing Donkey Kong for 3 hours. That kind of went the wrong way. So you get your company, you do all your OSINT, and then you get up on stage, and you get in your little soundproof booth, and then you start making your phone calls, trying to get those flags, right? They give you a list of flags to get. Now, I've been doing security for, 7 years now. I did IT for another 12. It's a pretty decent, chunk of career time, I think. I know a couple of things. How is my call going to go over if I'm vishing a tech support guy trying to, think, oh, you're dumb, or if I have this mindset like you suck? It's not. Whatever they say goes, and I'm going to get my flags that way. When I finally got somebody to answer, 20 minutes later, you only have 25 minutes, so I was kind of screwed at this point. The guy that answered was in their game support. And I said, hey, so-and-so from corporate security, we rolled out some new antivirus, and we just want to check to make sure it went okay. We've had some problems. I was like, can you check in your system tray? And now I didn't know what AV they had. Can you check in your system tray and see if the little M is there? He was like, oh no, but I see Intel, I see VPN, I see this. He read me off his entire system tray. And it was amazing, just from going with that. And then he asked me my email, just to kind of verify I was who I was. And I was like, michael.smith@nintendo.com. He goes, oh, do you mean NOA.nintendo.com? I was like, yeah, of course I mean that. Silly me, right? That's me suspending my ego, thinking that I knew that and just trusting what he said was correct. And then that he didn't even think two things about it. So building rapport is really, that's why I put this slide first, is like of the utmost importance when you're doing improv and SE. I used to think that I was a really great listener. My friends would come to me, oh, Danny's a really great listener. He's always there for my problems, and he'll sit and listen. And that's cool, but I realize I've been a shitty listener for 36 years. And we all do this. It's not because we're bad people. Most of us. It's that when we're engaging in a conversation, we always try to think about what's next in that conversation, right? What's coming next? What can I respond with? What kind of gem of wisdom can I give them? But if you're not actively listening, then you're not really getting everything. And in improv, that's huge, right? There's short form and long form improv. Short form is kind of like these quick 2-3 minute scenes. Long form can go on in a single environment up on stage for an hour or two. That shit takes time, and you have to do callbacks, right? You're like, oh, this scene we did this, so now let's do another scene based off of this. And if you are not actively listening, you're going to get lost real quick. And I still have issues because there's so much going on, and you're trying to be funny. No matter what anybody says, you're trying to be funny. There's a lot of schools of thought saying, oh, just go and be natural. No, because if you're boring, I'm going to lose interest. There's that part of it. So, I got to this realization when I took SE training last year in February from SE Org. It was Chris and Michelle and their whole crew, and they would go out, or they would put us in teams, and they told us to go out in Orlando, right? And you're in teams, and here are your flags. And each night they got progressively harder. I'm not going to tell you the hardest ones because I don't want to spoil for anybody that might take it, but they're horrifying. But the first simple one, bless you, was get somebody's first and last name. That seems okay. I'm conversational. I can get people's names. Last names are incredibly intimate, if you think about it. If you just meet somebody on the street, how often do you give them your last name if they just ask for it? That's an immediate fucking red flag, right? So I found it to be really difficult. And I found when I would approach these people, I'm obviously not a small guy, approaching this little lady with bare speed. And I was like, hi, how are you? And she's like, oh, what the hell? What are you doing? And I'm already asking my questions, my building rapport questions. First ever, engagement, and I'm just barreling through, thinking ahead. Remember, can't think ahead, can't plan. And failed miserably, because I wasn't listening to what she was telling me. So if I was listening, I would have figured out that she was horrified by me and was slowly turning this way, right? So that was my big lesson in, holy shit, I don't know how to listen. There's a big difference, there's a big gap between being a good listener and a skilled listener. And, that's what happens. We all have things to do, we're busy, we have cell phones, we have this, that, and the other thing, with people trying to get a hold of us. But if you're on an SE engagement, the thing you might need the most, whether it's, like I said, phishing or vishing, if you're on that phone and you're trying to build that conversation with them and they mention something offhand like, oh, my daughter, and you just skate right by it, that could be a whole nother phishing lure for them later, right? But you missed it because you're so busy thinking about what's ahead. And obviously that can't work in improv because there is no plan, right? There is no plot to improv. So, I talked about being funny a little bit earlier on, and this is where improv gets interesting, right? It's finding the game of the scene. Hence the title of the thing, Game of the SE. What's the game? It's the funny thing, right? It's, you come out and you start establishing these worlds, and for first time people going to improv, they might think, oh, this isn't, for the first 10 minutes, they're like, holy shit, this sucks. They're just talking about horses and a barn or whatever, like this, but we're building, we're trying to find that funny thing, and all of a sudden you discover, oh, the farmer likes to dress up in Barbie clothes. Oh, okay, well there's the game. Right? You found that funny thing. And then from there, you raise those stakes, right? You explore that world, walk-ons, jog-outs, cut scenes, all of this. So a walk-on in a scene is when, if two people are in a scene, third, fourth guy comes out and they start adding to that world. Right? So that's, once you find that game, and then you just keep hitting on that over and over again, and then finding little different sub-games, right? So one of the best illustrations of this is the Herald. This goes into finding the game and active listening. Now, I don't expect you guys to follow this to a T, because this is really convoluted, right? Let's see if my little laser pointing thing. Okay, cool. So the Herald is basically like comedy Inception. Think of it like that. Going 3 levels down with like 6 levels sideways. Right? So you start off with the opening where people come out and they ask the audience for a suggestion. Like, oh, I suggest ladder. And then people come out and tell what the word ladder means to them, right? And then once those monologues are done, people come out and start building that world. So building the world is that first beat. And this is mostly just explaining improv to you guys. And this is just one of the forms of it. And then that first beat is just coming out and doing scenes about whatever somebody brought up about ladders or working on their house, whatever. But the whole time you're back here actively listening as a member of that troupe if you're not out there and paying attention to those details because you're going to call them again in that second beat. And then those are going to be 4 or 5 3-minute scenes, right? And then you have to keep all of that together. And when I talked about heightening and finding that game, coming down to that third beat and just really going apeshit like, oh, now this guy has a fetish with ladders, or he used a ladder to kill his neighbor, and all of a sudden, like, that escalated quickly. Notice right here it says plot with a big line through it. I'm going to hammer that. No plot. There's no plot in improv. There is just inspiration for new things. And then, of course, you have some group games and stuff that in the middle of all of this, you're trying to follow, and you're back here and thinking, oh my God, is my fly open the whole time? And all of a sudden, like, your mind is wandering and all this other kind of stuff. You're still paying attention to all of this enough to do a big group game that has nothing to do with any of those beats. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about active listening, right? These connections and these callbacks. Because what SE engagement ends after one day? None of them, right? They're longer than that, and there's multiple aspects, right? Your physical game can then tie back to your phishing campaigns and all kinds of things. So those connections, those callbacks, whatever OSINT that you had during SE, and like, oh, I know that these people do their trash, right? And I know that these people do their laundry. Well, that's cool because now I can send a phishing email from their vendors and all that kind of stuff. It's these connections, these callbacks, this attention to detail. That is why improv has just changed my entire viewing of what it takes to be a social engineer. Even Hitler had a dog. When I talk about empathy, right? When you're up on stage in improv, it's the underlying skill of being changeable in a scene is empathy. It's the ability to see where somebody else is coming from, to be fluid, to, most importantly, adopt points of view that you not only were not expecting, but you vehemently and wholeheartedly disagree with. But if I'm out on stage and somebody gives me that gift of labeling me, it's weird to say it out loud, but like, oh, I'm suddenly Hitler or Mussolini or whatever, I can't all of a sudden be apologetic Hitler. How is that funny? You know? And this is what the spirit of improv is. It's not being this politically correct, like, oh no, you could never call me Hitler, like that's just mean. No, okay, well that's cool. Well then, he had a dog. Maybe my scene is him playing with a dog, or he has a soft spot for kittens, or whatever. My point with it is that adopting that viewpoint of somebody that, maybe he got a bad rap. Yeah. He didn't. He's a monster. Let me qualify that, because this is being recorded. Hitler was not a nice guy. But I use that to illustrate the fact of when you are forming your pretexts for your social engineer engagements, when you are creating those phishing alerts, I mean, even if you're not like an active SE going, dressing up in a hard hat and a ladder or whatever, and you're just in charge of your company's phishing program, right? How about we write some lures that will actually get some people? Like, I mean, we've all seen the phishing programs, right? Like, oh good, everything's misspelled and this thing has like a link in Comic Sans. This is legit. Let me just report that and I did my job for the day. No, if you want to write really good phishing lures, adopt the point of view of the attacker trying to get in. What would they have done to get that? What OSINT would they have done to get that? And what dastardly thing would you write in there to get them to click on something? That brings up a cool side point of why I really liked my training and all of my time at the SE Village with SE Org and with Chris Hadnaggy and Michelle Fincher, is that they really value empathy. Their thing, and I will believe this until the day I die, is leave them better for having met you. Right? There is influence and there is manipulation. Chris will admit, as he has, like he's had to use manipulation. That's just sometimes that's how you get the job done. But if we can even approach an improv scene or an engagement or life with just a little more empathy and with the thought in the back of your head for leaving them better for having met you, you still get what you want and don't have to stay up at night thinking, God, did I fuck up that guy's week? I've heard stories from Chris and Michelle about times that they've had to be manipulative. And there's a couple stories that if you ever had a chance to corner them, they might tell you that will keep them up at night sometimes. Like, it's just, they've had to do it. That's why it's better. Leave them better for having met you. The empathy goes a very, very long way. Nonverbals, right? Nonverbals. One of my favorite quotes by one of the godfathers of improv, Del Close. In improv, there are pretty much two major areas, right? Chicago and New York. And Del started in Chicago and then brought that was the improv troupe known as Second City, and then brought it to New York to the troupe known as the Upright Citizens Brigade. Has anybody ever heard of them? Cool. UCB is awesome. If you ever get a chance, you can write this down later, but go on YouTube, look up Upright Citizens Brigade, Ass Cat. It's like a bunch of A's with an SS and a cat. It's the funniest shit you're ever going to see. But nonverbals, how do you use nonverbals in our everyday life, right? And how can we use that to our advantage in an engagement? So, story time, again, to really illustrate this. When I was doing my training down in Orlando, the second night we went out, we were pretty successful the first night, like solos and that kind of thing. I got all my flags. It was awesome. Feeling really good about myself, right? Second night was harder. You had to get a little more detailed things. Like you had to get, what was it? Like family members' names, right? Some family history stuff. So what do? As I am naturally prone to do, I start making stories. I start building these personas. Like, this is going to be awesome. And I had this, thing of like, I was out running. Despite my doughy exterior, I do enjoy running. And I ran in Orlando, they have helicopter tours. And I was like, that's going to be my story. I'm going to say that I was here for a bachelor party and I freaked out and I lied to my friends that like I was too scared of the helicopter and I had a heart attack and blah, blah, blah. And I had this whole shit concocted in my head. Guess how far that got me when I tried to get my flags? Literally the first thing out of this woman's mouth was, oh my God, is this a hidden camera show? That's how you know you done goofed. We went to downtown Orlando. I led with the punchline because it was funnier that way. Improv. I went to downtown Orlando, and we were doing kind of singles or whatever, and the best place to get people to talk is smoking pits, right? Like smokers' lounges, whatever, bars, like, and that's like the obvious go-to for anybody who hasn't done this before. I don't even smoke, and I smoked like a pack that week. That was my crutch. Like, that's how I get over my thing of asking all these awkward questions. In fact, they're not awkward, it's just my head telling me that. So I naturally, like, I had done really well at some of the bars the night before. So I find a little smoker's lounge. Now, it's not a bar, it's like a family, thing downtown Orlando, if anybody's ever been. And of course, since I'm getting in the headspace to be this character that freaked out for a helicopter ride, I just fucking come charging in, and she's obviously like all of a sudden like, what the hell? And like, I'm acting all nervous and shit like that. Like, all of a sudden, all of my before I even really said anything, I could see it in her face. All of my nonverbals, this like, jerky smoking motion, and like just looking around, like, I was really overdoing it. I hope there's no like surveillance video of this, because it was just god awful. That's what keeps me up at night, is that attempt. And then, that was her reaction. And then, of course, my two buddies who are on my team, they come and try to bail me out, and like, oh, don't worry about him, blah, 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 he's just mentally retarded, you're fine. He's a little slow. And then I bailed. I was like, no, I'm out. This was too embarrassing. Let's just go drink the night away, please. Just booze and sushi was my medicine that night. All right. And that also goes into mirroring, right? This is how mirroring is one of the easiest and most complicated things to do when it comes to nonverbals, right? Because you have to be active about it, but not overactive about it. The same goes for improv. When you're in a scene and you're reacting to your partner, it's never about the words being spoken. It is how the audience is looking at you reacting to your partner. Is it a real reaction, or do I know I'm at an improv show? Like, there's the difference, right? Overacting, like being the crazy guy in improv, right? Like, that's funny sometimes, but you need a straight man. So those nonverbals really help level set what your scene is going to be about. When it comes to SE, mirroring, right? This actually really helps. If somebody's kind of bladed away from you and they have their arms kind of like this, that's a really defensive posture to be aware of, right? But if you know that's how somebody reacts to you in real life, play that in the improv show. Like, I've had somebody be defensive against me, so now I'm in a fight on an improv show. That's going to work. So it kind of works both ways, right? Mirroring is huge. Nonverbal communications make or break a scene, and they make or break building and keeping a pretext when you're doing an SE engagement. Speaking of pretext, negating your frame. If I call you up on an engagement and I'm trying to get information, and the first thing I say is, "Oh, thanks for that. Good thing I'm not a hacker, huh?" You've just negated your frame, and that person on the other end of the phone is thinking, "Oh shit, what if he is a hacker? I better hang up and call security." And now you have an incident, and now everything goes to hell. All right? That's negating your frame. This goes back to yes and. Yes and. Give gifts. Build the scene. Commit to the character you are. If you are Osama bin Laden on stage, commit to that. It'll be over in a few minutes. It's not going to be that bad, I promise you. So the worst thing that you can do in SE is negating your frame. You're probably wondering what commit to the cheese means. So this is one of my graduation shows from one of my improv classes, right? And it's going very well. I'm kind of proud of myself. And this is where yes and can really bite you in the ass. So I come out, and the pretext, the scene was, we're in a haunted mall, right? Or an abandoned mall is what it was. And so I come out, it's an abandoned mall. I think I come out as a mouse, and I'm holding cheese, and that's what's going to be my thing now. And then my partners come out, and they're all ghosts. All of a sudden, I have to be a ghost, but I can't drop that cheese. I have to commit to that cheese for the entire goddamn scene. And not only that, you have to play it up like, hey, what are you eating? Cheese, I found it in the back, you know, and that's how that plays forward. Because if you drop that cheese, this is also a little bit of like the object work that comes into improv. If you're opening your wallet, right, if you have one of the fold-out wallets, if I just go and open a wallet, and then all of a sudden go and do something else, where the hell did the wallet go? Like, you should go and pick it up. Like, I've actually learned to do that now. If I screw up my object work, I will go over and be like, oh, I dropped my wallet, and fold it and put it back in your pocket. If you're paying somebody, you pay like you just would. And if you're on the phone, by the way, if anybody's ever thinking about doing improv and wants to do a scene with a phone, not this. It's, your phone's like, that's real, right? That's object work. That is committing to your scene and not negating the frame that you have built that whole time. Goes the same for social engineering. Being present. Stop thinking ahead, right? I already told you that helicopter story, which really got me in some deep trouble. You can't plan that scene because then it's no longer improv. Then you're doing a sketch show, right? Being present in that moment. Feeling those emotions that you're supposed to be feeling, right? Another one of my favorite exercises that I would do even if I never did improv again is, you know, you're with your scene partner and you say, react as if they ate the last piece of pizza in the fridge, right? Like you were craving that all day. Like, how would you react? Now do a scene on that. And of course, like, I play it honest. I'm really angry. And then they say, play that scene the same way, but this person just picked up your phone. Right? Taking that same amount of anger and energy into something that would not have deserved it. Right? That's being present in that feeling, being present in that emotion. And it's all about shrinking your scope down. We all talk about scope a lot when it comes to pen testing and that kind of thing. But it's shrinking the now down, right? Making the now a little slower, a little richer, a little more evident in what you're trying to do. Like, just be present in that moment. I actually have a thing now. I have a 2.5-year-old son that my wife takes a lot of the pictures, and we both used to be with the phones like, oh my god, he farted again. That's fucking awesome. Right? Now I almost went the other way. Like, I don't take any pictures. Because I want to be right there when he took his first step. When he ate his first bite of solid food. When he mimicked the first time I said the C word, I was so proud. And I was in that moment. I wasn't taking a picture. I wasn't recording it. Yeah, don't worry about the C word. Forgot B is here, ladies and gentlemen. So, just being present in that moment really helps you kind of, just not in improv or SE, man, just in anything else. Being comfortable with silence, right? Everybody wants to fill the space with something. I've just now gotten better at not just barreling through my talks, right? You'll hear me do a little pause here and there. But it took a long time. Pregnant pauses are a great means of elicitation in your improv engagements, right? Talking does not equal confidence. We've all been on social media. The people who talk the most and are the loudest are probably some of the more insecure people out there, or like they're trying to compensate for something, or just they need to have something to say, they need to have the last word, or just big width and breadth of conversation, right? It's those silences that people need to fill them. So if you're just quiet and you ask a question and they answer, and then you nod and you're having and then they'll fill it with something else if you don't immediately say something afterwards. And that's where that elicitation takes place in SE. And it's the same way in improv, right? But silence is great there. You don't always have to be going back and forth. So that's another way that improv taught me to be comfortable in that silence. You are not stupid. No matter what anybody has ever told you, you are not a moron. You're not an idiot. And even if you don't know something, play that shit to the top of your intelligence, right? Don't get yourself down about you not knowing something. Go with what you do know and build on that. There is power in saying, I don't know. It's how I built my entire career. I'm probably going to say it a million more times just on Monday, right? So playing at the top of your intelligence in improv is, if somebody asks me a question in improv and then they've labeled me as like a doctor or a lawyer, whatever I say is the correct thing. And I am 100% confident. And if you have a good scene partner, they're not going to question you. If somebody asks me, how many miles to the moon? 65. Oh, cool, I didn't know it was so close. And then you move that scene along, right? But I am in that moment as a doctor, and unfortunately the top of my intelligence as a doctor is not knowing that the moon is considerably further away than 65 feet. This ties nicely to the part of SE where we come to open source intelligence, right? Gathering all the information that you need. You cannot have successful engagements if you don't have the legwork, right? If you don't have that background on people, if you're profiling employees, the company, the infrastructure, right? That is playing to the top of your intelligence. You're only as good as the intel that you can just make up in improv, right? Like, I can make anything up, and as long as you're confident in that. But the point here is to commit to it, and if you don't know something, say so. Or you can obviously bullshit your way through it. I've made a career out of it. So, thus concludes most of my presentation. For anybody who is curious about improv, first of all, if you're in the Philly area or Lehigh Valley area, check out Man Dude Bro every Friday night. They're amazing. Like, I love those guys. My wife has even taken an interest in SE and improv. She has now surpassed me at improv. She's taken more classes, more workshops than I have. It's a proud moment for me, because for 10 years she's never listened to a word I said, and now she's like an improv queen. So, Truth in Comedy, by Del Close and Charna Halpin. And, the UCB manual, thick book, but totally worth it. And my personal favorite, is How to Be the Greatest Improviser on Earth by Will Hines. It's incredibly well written, relatable, funny. Even if you never improv, just seeing those behind the scenes and how that works might give you some inspiration for other areas, of your life. Other podcasts, I don't have it up here, but Matt Besser does one called Improv for Humans. So that's a really great one. When it comes to SE, I talked a lot about Chris Hadnagi and Michelle Fincher, both from Social Engineer Org. Paul Ekman does a lot of the micro expressions, the facial expressions, which he does really great trainings too. You can get him on his website. I bought him myself for my own education. They're awesome. And Joe Navarro for that body language, right? That nonverbal communication. He's the man. He's done so many good things. I follow him on Twitter too. He's really entertaining. He was especially entertaining during like the presidential debates. Just seeing all the accommodating like nonverbals and how defensive they were with each other. So, just some of the resources. As always, feel free. I am on Twitter like crazy, as you'll see. So at D, aka CKI. And feel free to reach out, ask me if you're interested in any of this. I'll talk it up for hours. And that is what I got.
All right. Anybody have any questions?
Of course. It's going to be Bia that has it.
It's not a bad question. Stop judging me. Yeesh. Okay, so my question is, what if the person you're doing improv with says a word you've never heard before, like quadrilaterant, and you say, that's my favorite pizza topping, and then the people in the audience, how are they supposed to know? It's like,
because you're not playing on reality, right? Whatever they said, whatever you ascribe that meaning to be, that is now that. Now be careful, because if you do a callback, you gotta remember that. The funniest parts are where they make up those kind of words, or it's just, you flub a normal word, and that is now the pronunciation of that word for the rest of the show. If you go back to the normal pronunciation, the audience will call bullshit. Right? So that is that commitment, right? That is that, top of your intelligence. That is what that thing is, and for now, forever shall be.
Thank you. Peace out, everybody.
Anybody else have any questions?
Any other questions?
I kind of caught a little. I had to run out for a little bit and came back. I don't know if you talked about this. So in the social engineering aspect of things, when you're also using that reality, or you're creating your own reality and your own persona when you're trying to extract this information from someone during that engagement, what are your strategies, for example, for how would I say, like, to give them a little piece of information to make them feel more comfortable during the
absolutely
interaction?
This is a gold mine, right? Especially with Facebook and Twitter and social media. I had somebody do OSINT on me I also do a podcast called Rally Security. It's actually pretty funny. You should check it out. But for one of our episodes, it was all about social engineering. And I had a buddy of mine who does this professionally for a living for many years OSINT me. Holy shit. He found so many different things. Like, he found posts I made on websites a decade ago asking about, like, VNC for my company, and like, oh, here's my subnet. How can I get in here? If you Google my name, that post comes up. It's embarrassing, right? But if you know ahead of time, right? If you're doing that active listening and they mention, like, oh yeah, my son was sick today or whatever, even if this involves a little bit of deception, obviously all of this does. Yeah, my kid was sick today too. Even if I didn't have a son, I have a niece and a nephew to pull off of, right? So it's paying attention to those little things. What's their inflection in their voice? Do they seem stressed? Do they seem happy? Are they smiling as they talk to you? Reciprocate that. And maybe start a little small talk. Everybody's been on a good customer service call, right? That is actually not like a genuine one where they're trying to help you and they're, again, filling those silent pauses with chatter and information, right? Like, oh yeah, nice, oh yeah, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and I live here, and my 2 kids, or blah, 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 blah. And that is building that rapport. So absolutely, whatever little bit, like, I will mimic whatever they tell me to the top of my intelligence. Do not try to mimic something you know nothing about. If you've never had kids, never spent time around kids, don't try to mimic that. Like, we'll smell that a mile away. Like, that's gonna fail, right? Again, this all ties in with each other. As long as it's something you can confidently pull off, and naturally, and make them feel comfortable with you, yeah, absolutely. Build their world into yours. And say, oh, I've experienced, having to fix a gutter or whatever, like they had a hard day. And that rapport is just golden, man. My one thing that that I started out doing not very well is ignoring the rapport building. Cause I have friends, mostly I'm not an asshole, right? That I know of. Nobody has really called me that in a while. But the stranger doesn't know that. Like, to look at me, like, maybe I look like an asshole. I don't know. Don't answer, please. I'm having a good day today. But when, so they don't know me, right? So you have to build that rapport, whether it's within a 5-minute window or a 5-week-long engagement, right? That rapport builds, and you absolutely cannot rush it. Like, everybody will be skeptical of going too fast with something. But yeah, absolutely, build that world, even if you've never actually done it, but you're confident in top of your intelligence to do that.
All right, do we have time for another question? Yeah. All right, anybody have another question?
I didn't plant these, by the way, just because.
Totally not a plant.
Yeah.
So, this isn't really a question, more a comment. Something I do is I practice SE all the time. If I go to a hotel, which I'm stealing this from him, I'll lose my room key, and then I'll see if they'll let me into my room without checking anything. Or my old job, I used to go to our satellite sites, and I would see how deep into the company I could get without showing or saying anything. Every time, server room, 100%.
That's a great.
And it's really fun to do.
And he brings that up because over the weekend, my wife and I were in Lancaster overnight, and we went to an unnamed hotel. I'm pretty sure I named it on Twitter, so you can go find it. I still want it on video.
Rhymes with Ariat.
Oh, shut up. Your OPSEC sucks. And it was the key I had didn't work, but I was 14 floors up. I was like, fuck, I got all the way down, my wife's waiting for me, and I saw, and this is how you can see yourself, it's really easy. I saw a cleaning lady down there, and I was like, excuse me, like, can you try your key? And her key worked. I was like, oh, she tried mine, and it didn't. And I was like, oh, can I just go in? And she goes, oh no, you'll have to go down and get a key. I was like, oh, I just have to put something in the room real quick and then I'll go down. Oh, okay. So she opens the door so I can put my bag in, and she's already busy. She's taking off down the hallway. So I'm in the room. That little change in my approach to her of, again, that's another one of the principles I didn't cover, but that scarcity of time. I just need a couple minutes of your time. Or asking for help. All of those things played in right then. And then to couple that, when we actually did leave and came back, I was like, oh, I'm gonna fix this room key situation. I had a working one. So I gave him the blank one. I didn't even try this. And I was like, oh, can I just get another copy of a room key for, room 1408? And, she's like, she's like, oh, okay, 1408. I just cut it and gave it to me. No ID. Nothing. I could have picked an arbitrary room number and gotten into it. Don't do that. SE yourselves. The other one is, getting into your Verizon information, right? Like if you have Verizon, AT&T, cell phone, gas bills, whatever. See how much you can do with your account with giving as little as possible. That's one of those ways you can practice above and beyond improv. But Jesus, I love improv so much, and I hope you guys enjoyed the time here. Okay.